Okay.
All right, and then I will also show the slideshow
Okay.
so that we
Yes.
can get started with your pictures, right?
We're gonna let me just first of all do a general introduction on how I got to what I'm doing today, and I thank you for the invitation because I'm also doing it in Concord in April, and I have to get ready because I'm presenting it to our annual gathering, which is like your synod. It's a larger gathering of Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and so I'm doing a workshop there. It is called Synod, right? Is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Chad, come here.
so this is making me get it all ready and not procrastinate to the last minute. So I'm grateful for that. I was due for sabbatical actually in 2020, and then pandemic hit. So it got delayed. One of the things that I really wanted to do was to focus in after going through some of pandemic and the car fire. I saw two common themes playing out in not just our church, but in the community. And that was the importance of interspecies relationships and the connection that people found in comfort and hope when they were with their cat, their dog, their horse, chicken, duck. There's some amazing stories of search and rescue people going out during the car fire to feed animals when people couldn't get back to their homes, and people who really took it as a calling to care for these family members that got left behind. And we ended up at our church with 5 car fire survivors that had nowhere to go because they couldn't bring their animals to the Red Cross shelter. And Haven was full. And so it was looking like they were going to have to move them down to Cottonwood, Butte, other places. And that's happened again and again. The shelters fill up, and then where do the animals go? Thankfully, at the most recent fire, the Methodists partnered with us. And so we had people both at the Methodist church and our church who were sleeping on floors and bringing their pets in. We were trying to create space. We had the cat room, and the Methodists got the cats. I don't know if Joe Major will ever forgive me for that one. And we got the dogs. So, and I'm a cat lover, but one lady brought 10 cats, and we did not foresee that coming. The cat there were 2 litters of kittens that came with her, and yeah, Joe still reminds me of it. Anyway, that's a side note. What I saw was a common theme was the bond that people developed with their animals. And so I thought to myself, well, what could I do with that in a 3-month sabbatical that would be a learning for me and helpful for the church? And because I love animals, I began to explore and started off with a week in New York City visiting a woman, and I sent Katie some last minute bibliography things and resources, and her name is on this. I can't believe I forgot her, but I spent some time with her. She is, I believe, the first animal chaplain in the country. Her name is Sarah Bowen, and she wrote a book called Sacred Send-Offs, and she specializes in animal funerals. And she is known to go, she'll be driving down the road, and if she sees an animal that's dead on the side of the road, she carries a shovel in her back and a bag, and she does a funeral right there on the side of the road. She digs a hole and does a blessing for that animal. And so she has taken the St. Francis idea and the pet blessing days that St. Francis in the Catholic Church started to a whole new level. And it's a living and breathing model of seeing animals as spiritual beings. So I spent some time with her in this organization that she has started called Compassion Consortium, that once a month they do a online worship service on Sunday afternoons, where maybe 40-50 people chime in, and it's interspecies directed. So like we did, people will introduce themselves and their animals, and the prayers and the talks and everything that is done there is focused on animal well-being. And so that was but ultimately my goal was to get to Assisi and to walk in the footsteps of St. Francis, who some of you know is a patron saint of animals, but he was so much more, as I learned. And his prayer that starts out, "Praise be you, my Lord, with all your creatures," is how I started out my paper for the sabbatical, with the idea, was Francis praising animals, or was he joining the animals in praising God? And I think it was a little of both. The more I learned about Francis, the more I really saw his embracing of animals as God's creatures. So yes, if you want to turn to the pictures now, this is some pictures from Assisi. This some of you may know that St. Francis is the one who created the nativity scene. You know, those things we put around Christmas. St. Francis was the first one to create one. This is the first nativity scene ever made. It's in it's actually in the lower section of Assisi in his museum there. And you can see, you know, look at, I don't know, what animals do you see there? You have to look kind of close. They're kind of rough. Anybody see a sheep?
Cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see cow.
Yeah, there's a cow. It was fascinating to me because he was the first one to ever envision putting animals around the divine baby. It had never been done. And if you look over to the right, there's some birds too he's got over there in his barn. So you want to flip to the next slide. Yeah, so here's a little more, it's not as rough as the other one, but look how close the animals are allowed to that sacred child, you know, the donkey back there and the sheep. They're as close as the humans, almost closer. This was radical for Francis's time, because you know the vision was, and if you look at the paintings and the iconograph, the icon status that they placed baby Jesus on, to put him in such crude, now we're used to it, but back then in, you know, the 1500s, that was not cool. He got a lot of flack for making it look so common. And I was fascinated with the idea of his, he didn't do it blatantly. He didn't do a lot of writing about it. It was a visual. Let's put the animals in next to the baby.
Janet, can you give us a timeline of St. Francis?
He was born, I believe, in 1532 and died in late 1500s. If I'm thinking of the right, yeah. Somebody could Google that faster than if I remember right, I think, I can't remember if I put this in the picture. I have a picture of the place that he actually died at. The story is that he wanted to die with the people, and Assisi is built on a mountain, and his monastery, the folks that began to follow him they built a beautiful temple at the top of the mountain. And we'll get to some gates here, and I'll show you to get there. You had to go through 3 gates, and with each gate, it became more elaborate. The more rich people were allowed to live there. The very, very poor were not allowed to live the closest to the temple. And this really bothered Francis. So when he was dying, his monks begged him to be brought up to the temple so he could die on top of the mountain, closer to God, to be in a very divine setting. But he actually ended up dying on the lowest level of the valley. And they have a little plaque saying this is where he died. This is the place. And then after he died, then they moved his body up to the very sacred holy place. But he refused to let them move him out away from his people. He kept saying, I will die with my people. I will die with my people. Because as many of you know, he was passionate on behalf of the poor. So you can go to the next slide. This is actually in Assisi, a statue where Francis looking pretty ragged and holding a bird. As some of you may know, or if you've ever seen the very, very old film called Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, you know that he loved to talk to the birds. He had a very special relationship with the birds. You can go to the next slide. This is a picture of the very top of the temple, and you can see all the way at the bottom, there is a church kind of in the center there that was built around his death place. Yeah, right there.
Right.
That's where he died. He refused to come up to the top. And one of the things that you also will notice is that it looks a lot like California. I was kind of amazed of how, I mean, there are orange trees and lemon trees growing. Their lemon trees in Italy actually grow often on the sides of hillsides, and lemon tree pickers jump from tree to tree to pick the lemons, because they are in such an incline that you can't start at the trunk, because it's actually on the side of a mountain. These lemon trees grow, and they're huge. I mean, these are lemons, like they look like cantaloupes. They're the biggest lemons I've ever seen in my life, and they jump from tree to tree to pick them. But so anyway, it's very fertile, very beautiful land, very remind me a lot of California. Yeah, you can flip to the next. This was one of my favorite pictures. That is a live dog sitting at the foot, and that dog didn't move. We were walking through the streets of Assisi for several hours, and somebody had trained that dog to sit at the feet of a Assisi statue. And notice they also put a rainbow flag behind it. So it was 2022 intermixed with 1500s. But that dog just sat there, completely calm, waiting. I don't know who he was waiting for. There was nobody around, but that's a live dog. And I just loved that picture I had to take. And it was truly, you see all the animals sitting on his shoulder, and so it's truly an appreciation for animals in the community of Assisi. The contrast was directly across from this statue was a store that sold St. Francis of Assisi statues. That's all she sold. It was an open air store. They have, even when it's raining, they keep their doors open. And in flew a pigeon while we were there. And he was obviously injured. And out comes the sales lady with a broom, and she starts whacking the pigeon as we're standing in a shop filled with St. Francis statues. And she's taking a broom trying to kill this pigeon. And I thought, oh, I have to be on candid camera. This cannot be happening. I'm looking around going, this is a trick. This is what is going on. And I said, oh, please don't. I think he's hurt. Oh, he's always coming in here. He needs to go, and she's swatting him. So in her very strong Italian accent. So he flies out and then flies in the other door and comes into the side that we're in. We're on the other side of the store, and he comes in and lands at my feet. And I'm like, oh, you poor bird. And oh my gosh, what is St. Francis doing right now? And my daughter quickly comes and swoops up the bird and holds it in her arms. And the lady's like, don't keep that bird in here. I mean, I was so mad. I stomped out of that store. I didn't buy anything from her. I was going to buy a statue. One of my church members wanted a statue. Well, I found somewhere else to buy a statue. And Michaela, my oldest, took that bird, and there was a gentleman down the way who had some birds in cages that he was obviously feeding. And so she brought that bird down to him and set it with him. He was sound asleep, but that bird stayed right next to that man, somehow knew it was a safe place. And to this day, I still can't believe that happened, but it's the sad reality that, you know, these places are tourist traps, you know, and even in the midst of Assisi, somebody lost the message. So, okay, you can flip the next slide. This is an example of some of also the artwork. You can see a wolf standing at the, or it could be a dog standing at the foot of the wooden carving of Assisi, of St. Francis of Assisi, and then the birds, and it was just exquisite. And they're selling beautiful plants. Lavender is huge there, and it was kind of funny to us Californians how many people were oohing and awing over the lavender, you know, the lavender shops, the lavender soaps, the lavender plants. And I'm going, girls, you do know that grows in my front yard. we tried not to be, you know, haughty or any prideful about it. But yeah, the tourists, the non-Californian tourists were all over the lavender. So you can go ahead and flip next. So this is an example of one of the gates. This is the first gate. Outside of this gate was where the poorest and the poor are allowed to live, even to this day. So that seems to have lost the meaning, you know, even, and there are still monks and Franciscan monks who say that is not what Francis would approve of. But these gates separate out the classes. So the poorest of the poor here, we walk through, and then there's, I didn't take pictures, but there's another gate to the far back corner, and you walk through the next gate, and then the next wealthiest are allowed to live. And then the final gate, and of course, the monastery where the monks live is at the very top up there. So it's literally a metaphor for classism and separation that would have shamed Francis greatly. Yet, you know, he is known for this town, this little town of Assisi. You can go ahead and flip. I wanted just to take a picture of this so you could see the olive. I know you make out the olive trees there. I said, oh, this looks like California. I just cannot believe how much it looks like California. You can go ahead and flip it again. And that's my family, and that's a horrible picture of me because we were looking right into the sun and we were trying to keep our eyes open. But my daughter on the left is the one who rescued the bird. My daughter on the right who is the diva who had to dress us every day for how we were going to walk around Italy. So that's, but anyway, you guys switch to the next one. I can't remember what I had next after this. What did I have next, Katie?
You didn't give me any more pictures.
Okay, good. Okay, so yes, the question, do animals have spiritual lives? I begin my basis of this with John 3:16, which you probably all have memorized, but it starts out, God so loved the what?
World.
The world. And in the Hebrew, that understanding is all of creation. That's human and non-human. That is what Sarah Bone talks about as interspecies. She really advocates for a new way of discussing our relationship with creation by using the terminology interspecies. If you remember, there is a text in Genesis 1 where it states that humans are given dominion over creation. You know, we're handed creation. We're to have rule over it. And for many, many years, that's exactly how it was interpreted, and somebody wants to participate. Oh, then my dogs are saying they want to participate too. Okay, yes, I know. Suki, come here. Suki. They hear and they want to be a part. But what if dominion over creation is a wrong interpretation of Genesis 1? What if we're not to be in control over interspecies, but in relationship to them and with them? The books that I read and the approaches that I connected with were all about, if we are bearers of the image of God, we are to be stewards of creation and to befriend and care for it as a mother or father would do for a child. Many people that I encountered talk about their pets as their children, as a part of the family. And one of Katie will know this name probably. His name is William Willimon, and he is a preacher that's been around for ages, out of the Methodist tradition. And he preached a sermon that I listened to, that if churches would simply open their hearts to the rest of the family, we mainline denominations might not be decreasing so dramatically. If we would consider that there is a part of the family that is being left out in the church, and that's that family that we leave in the backyard or we put in the garage, that we don't include, as you are including tonight. You are including part of your family in the study tonight, and there's something valuable about that. Willimon says the church for too long has ignored the spirituality of animals. Meister Eckhart says anyone who truly knows creatures may be excused from listening to sermons, for every creature is full of God and is a book in and of themselves. I don't know if Bob would agree with that, Katie, or if I even agree with it, because if we can't do sermons anymore, I don't know where our life is, but Master Eckhart says anybody who truly knows creatures can be excused from listening to sermons, because the ones you're holding in your arms are sermons in and of themselves. The ones that you are relating with are a sermon.
Next time you don't like Bob's sermon, you can tell him that.
Oh, there you go. Don't tell him I said it, please. I want to stay in a good relationship there. Tell them that your pet is a sermon in and of himself. Yes. Yeah. The bibliographies that I sent you, and I emailed more to Katie, she can include for you. You will notice that a lot of the writings that are being done have just been in the 21st century. This is relatively new to theologians. To one of the things that while I was on sabbatical, we had an interim, but one Sunday a month of the 3 months I was gone, we had guest speakers, and one of them was a Buddhist monk who came and talked about the Buddhist approach to animals. Some of you may know that I got all these books. The Buddhists are known for animal rights advocates. And so this is a book, The Great Compassion, Buddhism and Animal Rights. So Reverend Helen of the Buddhist Priory here in Reading came and spoke for us. Then we also had Mark Story, the CEO of Haven Humane, came. And then we had, gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Sherry. She is the animal care manager at Turtle Bay, and she brought the skunk with her to church. And so those were our 3 guest speakers, and they were fascinated with an idea of a church that would embrace animals. We were fascinated. They were willing to come and talk to us about animals, and they gave their impressions of how they have seen the sacred alive and well in the animals that they work with. Some of you probably know the name Jane Goodall. An example of the sacred, I believe, is in much of her writings, but one of the things she tells about is about the chimps and the zen of falling water. There's a waterfall in Tanzania, which is about 12 feet high, fairly modest in line of waterfalls, but it is quite beautiful. And it's here that she noted that chimpanzees come to dance. There is a video online you can look up. It's narrated by Jane Goodall, and she is the first to observe this ritual, and it is a ritual because it happens on a regular basis, and that's and part of the definition of a ritual is on a regular basis with a meaning beyond itself. And she says that the adult male approaches the riverbed with this slow rhythmic gait, not unlike our own, and he throws rocks and trees into the branches of the falls. Then he catches a vine and he swings above them, and then finally he sits on a rock in the stream, his head resting on his forearm, and he watches the water go by. And he does this on a regular basis. And then she noticed that that when it begins to rain, and the rain starts coming into the water, the chimps all start to jump up and down around the waterfall, almost in joy. And then they will stop jumping, and that they will sit and they will just look at the waterfall. And she said, chimps can't swim. First of all, you need to know, why would they gather where they could slip on the rocks? It's very dangerous for chimps to gather around slippery rocks. Why would they get on top of a rock if they can't swim? And why would they stay on top of that rock? Goodall says, I can't help feeling that this waterfall display that they go through on a regular basis is perhaps triggered by feelings of awe and wonder. And what is the definition of worship but to express awe and wonder? Chimpanzee brain is similar to ours. They have emotions that are clearly similar to what we call happiness, sadness, fear, despair. So why wouldn't they have feelings that are akin to spirituality, which is really being amazed at things outside yourself? So my daughter will tell a story about, she has a rescue dog, and she knew that dog was the right dog for her because when she went to the shelter, the dog and her were outside playing, and the dog saw a praying mantis, that little green, funny looking thing. And the dog went up to it and didn't hit it, just went up to it and put its nose right next to the praying mantis, very gentle. And this is a part lab, part husky, filled with energy, bouncing. But in that moment, that dog stopped to be what? Amazed, in awe, curious. Curiosity, one of my favorite statements about curiosity comes from, we wrote this down, Carl Safina wrote a book called Beyond Words. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's also in your bibliography. And he says that animals, he was particularly talking about elephants, have feelings of compassion. We don't know exactly what elephants are feeling, but there's a YouTube video I sent in the resources for you. You can click on, and it shows about 20 different situations of animals rescuing other animals, not necessarily of their own. So that there is some form of engagement that animals have of compassion for others. And he says, Carl Safina asserts that many animals are curious. For humans, curiosity is a precursor to wonder, which is a precursor to spirituality. So if we follow that same line of thought, animals are spiritual. If animals experience wonder and are curious, that is the basis for spirituality. And so one of the books that was the book that really guided, I had the congregation read, we bought about 30 copies of it, called The Grace of Dogs. And I share this with you fellow Lutherans because this gentleman teaches at Luther Seminary, and I do believe Katie knows him. Our congregation loved this book, absolutely loved it. It's an easy read. It is fascinating. He brings up science. He brings up the evolution. Now, he specifically focuses on dogs, but I will tell you that also in the research I was doing, there's solid research for cats as well. But so I'm not to leave the cat lovers out. But he specifically does the work of the grace of dogs. It's called A Boy, a Black Lab, and a Father's Search for the Canine Soul. If any of you know the name Nadia Boltz-Weber, she's a radical pastor who is covered in tattoos and has turned the church on its head in her speaking and her prophetic voice. She gave this book 2 thumbs up, beautifully written, touching, and profound. And Brian McLaren, who is one of my favorite writers, says this book will make you smile, shed a tear, and nod in recognition. So these are huge accolades for this. He must be fairly young, is he, Katie? Yeah.
Yeah, he was just finishing he had just finished his PhD when I was at Princeton, and I graduated in 2010. So
yeah. So he is making inroads into a brand new path for people of faith and the church. I will tell you, the book starts out sad. And so just get ready. In the first chapter, you might shed a few tears, but then he takes the story into hope. And really, he explores a variety of things, everything from how science has shown us how to understand spirituality, how to understand our development of our faith and how we enact that through human ritual. And then he really builds up how dogs have evolved from wolves, and we have conditioned dogs to be spiritual in many ways, because we have conditioned them to be in relationship with us. And so if you understand spirituality as being in relationship with another, whether it is the divine or the divine which is present in every human being or every species, however you define that, where you see the divine and being in relationship with that divine is the act of spirituality. You are living your spiritual selves. So, Dr. Root asked, what does it mean to be made in God's image? Well, we certainly can't say you have to be a certain color, can we? You have to be white to be in God's image? Gosh, I hope not. You have to be male to be in God's image. Again, not a good plan as far as I could see. I don't think God would do that. I believe in a bigger God. So what does it mean to be made in God's image? I think to be made in God's image has far more to do with that soul, with that inwardness, that spiritual connection, than has anything to do with what we look like. So then if you take that as reality, then we begin to look for what is the innateness, the part that is inside a being that brings that spiritual connection. He brings up a lot of different ways in which compassion is played out and taught and learned in canines. German dog trainers refer to it as a feeling for feelings. The dog seems capable of reading our thoughts and reacting to the faintest changes of expression or mood. I don't know if you have experienced this, but I don't have to say a word to my dog. And somehow, especially my bigger one, knows when I'm getting ready to go to the park. And it's not always at the same time. And I don't necessarily do the same things, but somehow that dog just knows we're getting ready to go to the park, or we're going in the car. Now he does know words, and a lot of words, but I don't say a word. I don't say anything. And all of a sudden, and because he has to have a toy whenever we get in the car. So he picks up his toy and comes running to look at me like, is this it? Are we going? Are we going? And I'm like, how do you know where we're going? I didn't say a word. I don't know how that makes no logical sense to me, but he knows. Dr. Root says it's because we have conditioned dogs, and they have developed over generations of selective breeding to be in tune to human emotion. I will also say that, because he really focuses on dogs, but I will tell you that there's a wonderful book, and I was trying to get it right before I came on. There's a wonderful book about a cat who lived at a nursing home and was famous. Do you know, some of you know, it was famous for going into the room when someone was preparing to transition, preparing to die. And we had that book, and I bought that book. I set out all these books during sabbatical. I hope to get them back. That one I still haven't got back. But it's a whole story about this cat who the staff just knew whenever that cat went into a room, that person was getting ready to die. One doctor didn't believe it. There were two people that were transitioning, about ready to die, and the cat went into one room, and the doctor said, well, that just proves the cat doesn't know what he's talking about, because so-and-so is going to go first. You know, yeah, that cat's, you guys are crazy. That cat doesn't know what he's talking about, you know. And the staff said, okay, whatever you say. 2 weeks later, to the day of him stating that, the cat had stayed with this one person the entire time. That person died. The other person that he said would go first lasted another 2 weeks, because cat went to the next patient after that. The cat knew, the doctor didn't know. So how is that possible? I'd love somebody to tell me how that's possible. I mean, here is a cat that outsmarted a doctor. You know, it's those kind of experiences that I was just made aware of over and over and over, that said to me, there is something that we have overlooked here in our interspecies relationships, especially with animals who are companions with us. You know, the companion animals. Although there's something, I'm sure, to be said for chickens and ducks. I have 2 ducks. My ducks won't communicate with me much except to tell me that they want to be fed. and they're on a boycott right now. For some reason, they aren't laying eggs. I think it's because it's not warm enough. I don't know. And when I leave them for 2 weeks and somebody comes and takes care of them, then they lay eggs. So what is that about? You know, so I don't know. But I can tell you that the animals that I read about and learned about, specifically with cats and dogs, profound sense of compassion could be expressed there. John 21, verse 17, Jesus asked Peter if he loves him, and Peter says, yes. Jesus replies, then feed my sheep. Meaning to love Jesus is to join him in his intention to love the world. I genuinely believe that I just left the dog park, and when you go in the dog park with your dogs, there are so many dogs that just are happy to be with others. You know, there is this genuine belief that, oh, I'm so glad to see you, another being. I want to say hello. I'm glad you're here. You know, it's just that genuine look in your eyes. I am grateful that another being is here with me. Some dog psychologists believe dogs bark because they're telling you either that they're glad you're here, or if you leave them, they're saying, why am I alone? I wasn't meant to be alone. I'm not meant to be alone. This is not who I am. I'm meant to be with other beings. And since the evolution from wolf to dog, and Dr. Root kind of does a whole timeline on that, you can see how canines evolved into becoming related to humans in that relationship. I think there's huge amount of science, but more than science, that says that animals experience something that looks a lot like love. And if animals experience love, where does love come from? The Bible tells us where love comes from. Doesn't it say all love is from God? So if these beings are practicing and sharing love, that has to come from God. And if God is bestowing that gift inside of them, then I think we have an argument here that they have a soul. They have spiritual lives. So Andrew Root, I sent some handouts with some at the back of his book, in case you don't get his book. He answers the question that you all had posed to me. Do animals have, do animals have spirituality, or are they spiritual? Do they go to heaven? That's the question he answers. Do they go to heaven? You know, that was a movie. All dogs go to heaven. I watched it just for the fun of it, but I think it goes beyond that. Ilio Delio, I think I'm pronouncing it right, writes a story called Ensouled Animals, and it's about cats having souls. And she does a brilliant job of making the argument that, yeah, cats have souls, dogs have souls. They are creatures of God. They know love. She says, without becoming entangled in theological discourse, I want to say quite clearly that my cat Mango was ensouled. His soul was a core beingness, a particular part of life that was completely unique, with his own personality and mannerisms. To use the language of Franciscan philosopher Duns Scotus, Mango the cat revealed a thisness, a THISNESS, placing a great emphasis on the inherent dignity of each and everything that exists. Every living being gives glory to God by its unique core existence. To be a creature of God is to be brought in relationship in such a way that the divine mystery is expressed in concrete existence. So she gets a little wordy there, but she, then goes to Matthew 10, every sparrow that falls to the ground. Remember when Jesus talks about the sparrows are being taken care of by God? Every sparrow that falls to the ground is known and loved by God. The Spirit of God is present in that love to each creature here and now. So all creature life shares in a cosmic communion. So she says, as I reflect on the death of my cat Mango, I have no doubt that his core love energy will endure. His life has been inscribed on mine. The memory of his life is entangled with mine. My heart grieves for my brother Mango, my faithful companion, but I believe we shall be reunited in God's eternal presence. Now, I will tell you that nowhere in the Bible does it say that animals go to heaven. But I'm also going to ask, is there anywhere in the Bible where it says that all people go to heaven, or that heaven is what we've made it, with a bunch of angels and gold streets? Even the book of Revelation is not describing heaven. It's describing a new earth. So where is the description of heaven that we have so held on to, that we're so sure animals aren't in? So I guess that would, so anyway, if you look at what I sent Katie for you, you will notice that he does tackle some of those questions about do animals have a soul? He says, yes, of course they do. And yeah, also that could sound really weird because there have been countless volumes written on the Christian tradition on what the soul is. And it's actually a very tricky conversation. The concept of the soul assumes there is something in us that is non-material, something transcends or resists that reduction. The science has tried to prove the presence of the soul by weighing the body before it dies. You may have seen these studies, and then after the body dies, there's like some kind of entity that's missing that weighs less, and it's not the breath. It's not. There's something that's no longer there in the body because the body weighs less. I don't know. I'm first one to say, yeah, that's going to be a question I ask for God, when I get there. So what is this whole thing about with the soul? We've seen those old cartoons when somebody dies and the ghost goes flying out. But Judaism and Christianity have always been uneasy about this ghost in a body thing. And it's actually comes more from Greek philosophy than the Bible. And science makes it even a little more murky. And Sam is saying, Mom, I'm done. My dog here is saying, I'm done, Mom. I've been patient. I forgot to ask, did you have a time frame in mind, Katie? Okay, well.
Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes I can't stop talking and it's 9 o'clock till everybody gets to go.
Oh gosh, I don't want to do that. Look, Cindy's dog is already sound asleep. I don't want anybody to so he concludes by saying, if we see the soul as being based in a form of relatedness in relationship, then we have to say yes. And he particularly says dogs are uniquely shaped to relate to us through our embodied soul, full center, our face. Notice how often, but I would advocate for cats too. My cat used to always want to rub my face. That was the most interaction that my cat was most happy when they could see my face. Dogs are that way too. Dogs are in tune to a person's face. They watch that face. They watch cues. They see things that we do not see in our faces. And he says dogs may lack many of the cognitive abilities of humans, but the dog relates to us in a deeply personal way. And this ability makes dogs deeply soulful beasts, not because they have hidden internal ghosts hiding inside of them, but because like infants, they give themselves to humans in a way that can best be called soulful. And so that's his argument for that. There was another question he asked. So do dogs sin? Is it possible for dogs to sin? I'd never read that question before. He said, again, sin is a tricky concept in the theological tradition. Sin is deeper than and bigger than just doing bad things. It's sin, like the soul, is bound by relationship. We sin when we violate that relationship between us and God, between us and others. To lie, cheat, or steal is sin because it violates the relationship between you and your neighbor. We sin against God when we deny that we are our neighbor's keeper. So do dogs sin? He says, well, he's seen that there's a deep form of personal relatedness, but it is possible that a dog can violate that relationship. Anybody who's been bitten by a dog knows that, and especially if there was a love relationship, they felt betrayed when they were bitten by that dog. But dogs are unique creatures that relate to us in personal ways, sensing and even yearning for the soulfulness, that soul connection in relationship. So yeah, he says dogs are kind of able to sin, but not like human beings. But what is beautiful, though, is that even when doing something wrong, dogs ask for and accept our acts of forgiveness, as many of us have experienced. If you've ever fussed at a dog or a cat, they take it and then they will come back. Sometimes cats take a little longer to come back because I think they have a little stronger sense of independence. Suki, come here. They have a bit stronger independence than, excuse me, than cats do. But they still have that sense of they want to be back in relationship with you. Anyway, I want to leave some time for questions. If you have any questions, again, I sent you probably way more resources than you'll ever use in your entire life. But that is because I, like Katie, started out in Christian education, and I spent 20 years teaching in church. And so I do a lot of copies and I do a lot of handing more information than you could ever use in your entire life. So, because I value that. So do you have questions that I might answer about any of it?
I read a book, and I can't remember the name of it or how long ago it's been, but it was about the way that dogs communicate with us without words, that we are on a, like a telepathic connection with dogs. And that's why they know what we're thinking. And sometimes we think we know what they're thinking, but we're communicating on a different level.
There is a book I put on your bibliography called How to Speak Dog. Mastering the Art of Dog-Human Communication. It's really interesting how he brings out the idea, and he's a professor of psychology at University of British Columbia. And he also wrote the book, The Intelligence of Dogs. And if you notice on the front, the picture of the dog looking eye to eye with the human being. And the theory of a lot of these folks is that much of the communication that dogs do is through our eyes. And that if our eyes are closed, they sense that closed offness, that it's not, the communication is not happening. But if our eyes are open, and so dogs that go blind, or people that go blind, create different communication styles that are more telepathic than they are through the eyes. And I don't know what kind of science comes out of this. This is way beyond my brain. But yes, I do think there is something, and some psychologists think it's in our pheromones, or in the, I don't know if the word is aura. There is something that emits in us that communicates to dogs. That they sense that, and a cat that knows who's going to die next must be somehow in tune to those kind of emissions as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to share, I once watched a short documentary. It was not nearly long enough. I could have watched it all day. But it was about a woman who had some connection. She is like an animal psychologist or something, but she had some connections with maybe her husband or something, did software engineering. And so this person created a pad for her that had buttons on it, large buttons, and she taught her dog how to use the buttons to talk.
Yes.
And the part that just really got me was when she had a recording of the dog sleeping, and moving around, and you know how dogs sometimes will, you know, move around in their
Move their
sleep.
paws.
Yeah, move their paws and like makes like vocalize a little bit. And then the dog woke up and she asked the dog, you know, what were you dreaming about? And obviously the dog didn't really understand the words of
Right.
you know, the sentence, but the dog went over to the pad and, you know, touched on stranger, and you know, and kind of was
Ah,
able to express to her what was being experienced in the dream. And that was just amazing to me, that you know,
it's mind-boggling,
it's
isn't it?
we think that the barrier between us and our creatures is you know, is cognitive,
Mhm.
but maybe it's much more just language than we think, and we have no idea because it's a language barrier.
Right,
That we, you know,
right.
we assume, we make assumptions, but we have no idea really what's going on in there because we
And
have that
she
language
started
barrier.
this phenomenon where other people are ordering, I don't know if you noticed, but you can look online and other people have ordered the same kind of buttons, and they're starting with just a few. She has like
Mhm.
40 buttons.
Right, but you can start with just a few, with like the dog's name and potty and food and
Yeah,
drink, and
outside play,
yeah,
but that dog has so many, and will ask, I want to play with you. What play?
yeah,
Uses her. I think her name's Bunny. Is the dog's name
mhm,
Bunny?
yeah,
And
yeah,
Bunny play, or Bunny outside, Bunny
yeah,
hungry.
yeah,
It's unreal. And some people say, oh, it's fake. I said, you can't fake that much. You cannot. And the many things that are that dog is able to communicate is fascinating. Yeah. And it has started a whole phenomenon because other
yeah,
people are trying to do the same thing.
yeah. I was jealous. I wanted one for myself.
I know. Wouldn't that be amazing? Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I should introduce, I think she's barking because she's feeling left out. Come here. No, come here. Come here. This is my lap dog who insists of being on my lap. This is Sookie, and she is 13 years old and very insistent on the world revolving around her. And when she wants to do something, she will tell you she wants to do something. She's just very communicative. And the other one is was being bred in Fresno County to be a fight dog. He's part lab, part Rottweiler, and part Doberman, and he is a lover. He's not a fighter. And so he came to us terrified of other dogs because he'd been put in so many fights and did not. He knows I'm talking about him. Come here. You can get up on the you say hello. Yeah, you say hello on the camera. Yes. He says, why are you doing that to my mom? And it was a heartbreaking story because he's a lover, and dog fighting happens a lot in California, even though it's illegal. It's still going on, and it's horrific. And so he's a living testimony to it took a long time to him to get over that fear of other dogs. And when we go to the dog park, he has learned to stay by my side, and I can't, and I have to reassure him he's safe. Even, it's been probably 8 years now since that we've had him, and and he still needs to be reassured that he's safe, that other dogs aren't going to hurt him, even though he looks fierce and people are scared of him. I said, no, he's more scared of you.
Are you familiar with the poem? It's either called Overheard in the Orchard or Said the Robin to the Sparrow.
I've heard of that second one, but I can't I can't remember what's in it.
Said the Robin to the Sparrow. Friend, I'd really like to know why these human beings rush around and worry so. Said the sparrow to the robin, friend, I think that it must be that they have no heavenly father such as watches over you and me.
That gives me goosebumps.
My mom had that poem all the time, hanging on the wall the entire
Mhm,
time I was
mhm.
growing up. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm such a sucker.
And some people would say maybe that's one of the reasons you're more in tune to the divine in God's creatures.
Hmm.
You know, and that's what St. Francis really led me to grow closer in understanding was how he truly saw sacred in life that isn't just human life. And
That's the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon
mhm.
is so beautiful. And it's probably been over 40 years since I've seen it.
Oh yes, and it's really really old. So if you ever watch it, you're gonna, oh my gosh, I can't. I made my girls watch it, and they're like, "Mom, this is so old. The photography is so bad." I was like, "I know."
Oh, but the scenery was
the
gorgeous in
scenery
that
is
movie.
gorgeous. It's an amazing story of him. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
amazing story.
and the scenes when he's in his father's plant, the fabric dyeing plant,
Right.
you know, oh my
Yes.
goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
And
highly recommend it I think it's on Netflix or
yeah,
Amazon
I have
Prime
it.
or
If
something.
anybody would like to watch it, I have it on DVD. I'd be glad to drop it off your church. You guys could pass it around, because I had my church watch it. I was invited to do a webinar with the lady I talked with you about that I went to see in New York City. They did a webinar. If you look up Compassion Consortium, you'll see that there were three of us speaking. One was a woman who has spent 30 years studying St. Francis, and so she critiqued the movie from the historical part. Then John Deere, who is a priest in Monterey, that actually left at being a priest because he had gotten so disgusted with the Catholic Church and the power process, and he became an advocate. He has stood on the lines against apartheid. Archbishop Desmond Tutu had nominated John Deere twice for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is Desmond Tutu nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, saying there's nobody more worthy. And I'd never heard of the dude, you know. I was like, I don't know who John Deere is. He was on the show, and when I found out he was on the show, I almost backed out. I said, I don't want to do it. I'm just little me. I'm not going to sit up there with a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, you know. And so we each gave our little tidbits of information on what we knew and how we related to that movie. So it was all about discussing the movie. So if you look up Compassion Consortium, which is on your bibliography, you'll see it's still on YouTube. But I do have the DVD. I'd be happy to drop it off at the church. You could watch it. It is a great film, and really you see the love that he had for birds and flowers, you know, how he appreciated the fields. And you know, it's just this sheer joy the actor portrays as Francis. It's phenomenal. And it also highlights Claire, who had her own sisters, St. Clair did, and how she followed in the footsteps of Francis and then created her own abbey, and it was just beautiful. So. Any other thoughts?
Well, I will tell you, I adopted a dog once because I passed him and we looked at each other and I knew he was mine.
I believe that. You know, is there something called love at first sight in animals, in interspecies love at first sight? Maybe. That happened with my cat. It was a rescue cat, and we walked by it and it meowed at us. And I always say that Merlin adopted us. We didn't adopt him. He adopted us. He ignored everybody else and looked at us, meow, meow, meow. And I said, okay, I guess he chose us. Yeah. Well, and you will know people who are not animal people. I've learned, don't try to force it down their throats. It's not gonna, you don't get anywhere with that. We average about 7 dogs in our 2 services on Sunday morning. And occasionally we have a woman who brings her 2 cats to our second service, our smaller service. She brings them on leashes and they sit on her lap, and they seem to enjoy it. So we tell people we are a pet friendly church, and we understand if that doesn't jive with you. We get that, and we're sorry. We don't want you to not feel welcome. Everybody's welcome, but for the people who bring their dogs, those are a part of their family.
And I did like what Andrew said about I don't trust people who don't like dogs.
Don't you wonder? I do. I have to ask. And I do have a 95-year-old woman who has been bitten 3 times by 3 different dogs. And so she's terrified, but she has learned, and she's our greeter on Sunday mornings when she's in town and she's not traveling the world at 95. She's still doing that. She has learned when the dogs come in with the people, she just smiles and greets them, and has gotten over her fear. She's gotten through it. She doesn't engage. She doesn't walk up to them like a lot of us do and just hug the dogs, and that kind of stuff. But she also has gotten through her fear. And she said it was as a child, they were just traumatic experiences. And I get that. And I do know dogs sense fear. They understand fear. And when you're afraid, they're afraid. They may not know why they're afraid. So, but they know fear. And I grew up with horses, and I know horses know fear. If you're afraid, your horses are afraid. And so that's that. That is that sense of connection that I just can't explain. Do you have animals that come to church sometimes?
Occasionally.
Or no? Occasionally. Okay.
Nikki's been there.
Oh, okay.
We had a pig a couple weeks ago.
No way.
Yeah.
Somebody walked in with a pig?
Just the little one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
She sits in the back, so she just brought her pig and sat there in the back pew with her pig.
I'm so jealous. I'm so
How did
jealous.
I miss that?
Marilyn Pearson.
Oh my gosh.
Cute little thing.
I do have to confess one thing to you folks that I have confessed to my people. And that is that I love animals. I love creatures. I have yet to, and I don't know what I would do if somebody brought a snake. And I do have a church member who has a python, who has said that she's going to bring the python one day. And I may cry. That's all I can say is I may just cry because I'm petrified of snakes. And there's no rational reason. I can't explain to them why, except they slither around, and I have nightmares about them. I probably need to go to a therapist or something. I don't know.
Well, if the python comes to church, then you're going to have to grapple with Genesis chapter 3, I think.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to be, oh my gosh. I even preached a sermon on the snake on the pole, that, they put the snake on the pole as a way to cure the bites of the bad snake.
Yeah.
And it's actually the history of how we got the symbol for the medical doctors that has a snake wrapped around the pole. comes out of the
Mhm.
Bible. That was the hardest sermon, to talk that much about snakes. I mean, literally, I had to go home and just lay down for about 30 minutes and say, okay, I'm not going to talk about snakes again for a long time. So, well, I have thoroughly appreciated the opportunity to do this with you, and please know if any other questions come up. I'd be happy to share my guesses. This is all a guess, this is all hunches. I just have hunches that yes, animals are spiritual in their own way.
Yes,
So,
yes. All right, well, thank you so much for being with us today,
yes, thank
Janet.
you.
I certainly could not have done justice to this question in the way that you were able to, given that you had the opportunity to spend so much time on it.
Well, and it gave me some, I thank you for letting me use you as guinea pigs as I
Yeah.
get ready for the
We were
workshop I'm
glad, we're
doing.
glad to
Thank
prevent
you.
the procrastination.
Yes, I appreciate that. Yes.
All right, so friends,
Okay.
those of you who are regulars here, just give you a reminder, our next topic for next week is going to be what is race? And I put that in quotation marks intentionally. So we will have that, we'll have that question for next week. So thank you for being here. Hope everybody has a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Great, take
Yeah.
care.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.